Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. The bell above the courtyard hasn't rung in over 3 months. It's still hanging there, rusted in its cradle. But I haven't touched the rope since the night it nearly got us killed. That sound used to call the brothers to prayer. Now it only calls death from the tree line. It only takes one echo too many. That night they came up the slope. 6 of them, maybe more, crawling on elbows, digging their fingers into loose gravel, climbing without thought, without sound. We didn't hear them until the first one slammed into the east wall, mouth open and dragging a length of barbed wire behind him like a trophy. We lost 2 goats and 3 of our own before dawn. Thomas and I burned the bodies and bricked off the south wing. I haven't lit a fire or struck a bell since. I'm on the north wall now, crouched behind the parapet where a gargoyle used to sit before the weather, and time turned it into a lump of moss-covered stone. The wind's light today, a steady flow from the valley. Good for the bow. I've got 1 arrow knocked, broadhead, hand-filed, steel tip I salvaged off an old fencing spike. I only make noise when I have to. The infected down in the lowlands react more to vibration than sight. The ones who make it this far up the ridge tend to be different. Thinner, hungrier. They move quieter, almost like they've learned something from chasing deer for months. I don't know if I believe in mutation, but something is changing. Below the wall, the tree line wavers in the breeze. There's a ravine cutting across the slope, shallow but rocky, filled with broken branches from the last storm. Something moved through there 20 minutes ago. I heard it. Just a rustle. 1 branch snapping. Then nothing. Could have been an animal. Could have been someone scouting. I don't take chances. Not this close to sundown. Not after what happened to Gregor. He trusted a silhouette and ended up with half his throat gone before he could scream. I found him against the west fountain, eyes open, cross still hanging around his neck. Thomas was supposed to be back by now. He said he'd checked the lower catacombs for sealed supplies. Old food stores, wax-sealed bags of rice, maybe forgotten wine. He's got a flare if things go bad, but the flare's still in my pouch. He forgot to take it. That's what worries me. We have a rule, never go into the crypts alone. He broke it. I let him. That's on me. I keep telling myself, he's fine, just taking longer than planned. Maybe he's reorganizing the old sacristy. Maybe he's found something useful, but it's been hours, and the shadows are stretching now, spilling across the stone like spilled ink. This place gets cold fast once the light fades. I check the goats again, 7 of them, penned near the herb garden. They're alert, ears twitching. Animals always know before we do. Their heads keep turning toward the northeast slope. That's the 3rd time now. I stay low, crawl 2 feet along the top of the wall until I have a better view. Still nothing. But then, there, a dark figure in the brush. Too big to be a fox. Too steady to be random wind. I draw the string, hold. No breath, no motion. Just stillness. It ducks behind a stump, but not like prey. It's watching, studying. There was a time I would have fired already, sent the arrow into the dark, and hoped I hit something worth hitting. But after nearly 2 years in this place, I've learned that patience is survival. Fire too early, you lose a shot. Fire too late, you don't get another. I ease my weight forward, keeping the bow steady. I don't blink. My fingers don't shake. You only make that mistake once. There's a low creak from below, a goat moving against the pen. Still nervous. I trust them more than I trust my eyes now. I feel something shift in the trees, just beyond the ravine. A flicker, then a flash of black. A bird maybe. Then it drops, wings jerking, caught in mid-air. No sound, no warning. And I fire. The arrow disappears into the brush, a clean line through space, and a second later I hear it hit. Not wood, not rock, something soft and wet. There's a thrash. Leaves scatter, then silence. I wait. 5 seconds. 10. The brush settles. I lower the bow slowly, eyes still locked on the kill zone. Nothing moves. That doesn't mean it's over. I've seen them take hits before, stand up with a shaft through their chest and keep walking. But I'm not climbing down just yet. I move back, slip down the inner ladder, and cross the cloister in silence. The old flagstones are cold underfoot. I step around the central fountain, now dry and filled with vines. The doorway to the outer yard creaks but holds. The gate hasn't been forced. I check the tripwire trap, still set, no fresh footprints. I head into the woods with the blade in hand. The machete's not for fighting, it's for finishing. I follow the slope toward where the arrow landed, careful not to snap anything underfoot. I know this path. Dug it myself over 2 seasons. Staggered the steps so nothing can run straight at the wall. I find the arrow in a pile of damp leaves. It's buried in something. I crouch, brush back the foliage, and there it is. A man, or what's left of one. Clothes torn and matted, skin grey but intact. No bite marks. The arrow punched through his upper shoulder and pinned him to a stump. He's still twitching. The mouth moves, but no sound comes out. No teeth. Tongue's gone, eyes wide and milky, not all the way blind. I press a foot to his ribs, pull the arrow free, and watch the last of the movement bleed out of him. There's a tattoo on his chest, faded but recognizable. 2 arrows crossed inside a black ring. I've seen that mark once before. 8 months ago, on a man we caught stealing from the East Trail. He said he was part of a group called the Echo Path. They didn't settle. They moved, sent runners ahead to find weak points, branded them like livestock. If the runner made it, he earned food. If not, he became part of the noise. This one didn't make it. I checked the hands. Calloused. Not from labor, from climbing. I take the arrow, clean it with moss. I don't need more questions right now, just answers. And Tomas. I turn back to the wall, reset the spike trap on the trail, camouflage it with fallen pine boughs. The air's getting colder. I can see my breath when I exhale near the outer garden. That's not right for this early in the season. The goats are clustered tight when I get back. Eyes on the stairwell that leads down. That's when I know. Something's wrong. Thomas should have been back. I grab the taper and head inside. The catacombs beneath the monastery were built when men still feared burial without ritual. Thick stone, carved prayers, narrow passages designed to keep the dead separate from the living. They do a better job keeping us out now. The walls are cold and wet. My fingers trace grooves in the brick, the same grooves I memorized in the first winter here, when I paced these tunnels at night to keep my mind from unraveling. The air smells like vinegar and wax. I pass the first vault, still sealed. Second one, door open, crates disturbed, no sound. I call his name once, low, controlled, just loud enough to carry to the edge of the third chamber. Nothing. Then, movement. Something scraping along the floor. Not a step, a drag. I move closer, taper held high. The flame dances against the wall, casting shadows that stretch and breathe. The drag stops. A whisper breaks the silence. Brother. It's his voice, or something close, but it's too smooth, too exact. I freeze. The voice speaks again, softer, almost coaxing. Brother, down here. I extinguish the flame between my fingers and press into the stone, listening. The air shifts. I feel it on my skin. Not wind, just presence. There's someone in the third vault standing too still, too long, and then I see him. Or something that looks like him. Same robe, same height. But the head is tilted at an unnatural angle, like he's studying something inside his own mind. The light from the entrance catches the edge of his face. For a moment I don't move. My breath slows without conscious thought. That's something this life drills into you. Not discipline so much as survival through stillness. The thing in the vault doesn't speak again. Its chest doesn't rise. It just stands there, unmoving, as if waiting for something to shift in me. Then its head twitches to the side. Just a fraction. Just enough. The way an animal turns its ear toward a rustle in the grass. It's not Tomas. It can't be. I edge back 2 paces, placing my steps into the exact impressions I left moments ago. No echo, no stumble. My shoulder presses to the tunnel wall. I don't look away from the vault. I wait. 20 seconds. 30. The figure stays exactly where it was. The robe, our robe, the standard cassock we all wore, hangs wrong. One sleeve is longer than the other, dragging slightly. That's not something Thomas would tolerate. He always walked clean and straight, belt tied at the second knot like he learned in seminary. I know my brother. The thing finally moves. Not toward me, not away. It simply lowers its head, slowly, until its chin nearly touches its chest. Then it steps backward into shadow without turning around, and vanishes. I wait another minute before lighting the second taper. I only brought 2. The flame jumps to life, flickering in my cupped hand. I enter the third vault low, blade drawn. The shelves here are collapsed, jars of old wine smashed. One corner of the chamber is scorched, like someone set a small fire and stamped it out halfway through. A single candle lies at the center, still intact but untouched. Something about the wax feels wrong, too clean, too new. We haven't had access to new stock in months. We ration every ounce. There's no sign of Thomas. I return to the main hall, seal the vault door with the iron rod we keep by the entrance. That thing wore his clothes. I don't know what it is, but it's not welcome in the rest of this place. And if Thomas is still alive down there, if somehow he made it deeper, I need to find him, but not like this. Not in the dark, not alone. I make it back to the courtyard by moonrise. The goats have huddled into one corner of the pen, heads pressed together. Their tension hasn't faded. I toss down a fistful of dried oats to calm them, then scan the walls. No movement. The wind carries the sharp tang of old pine resin and cold stone. I climb back to the wall and watch the tree line for another hour. Still no movement, no pursuit. But something followed Thomas down there. I'm sure of it. I sit with my back against the upper chapel door and unstring the bow. There's a long scar along the grip where the wood split in winter, and I had to bind it with linen soaked in resin and dried over heat. Everything we use now is patched, fixed, reforged. We don't discard anything anymore. That habit of throwing out what's broken was part of the world before this one. The modern world fell apart because it forgot how to repair itself. Before all this, I wasn't a monk. Not really. I came here for silence. A year of quiet after the second round of outbreaks. The virus had reached the western cities by then. Boston, Chicago, Denver. The East Coast was already a mess. Rumors of martial law zones with fire breaks, where whole neighborhoods were burned before infection could spread. I left the city with a backpack, a composite bow, and more guilt than I could carry. I thought I'd stay a month. Rest. Pray maybe. Mend. Instead, I watched the broadcasts die one by one. By the time the last radio station went off the air, there were only 7 of us left at the monastery. Half were true brothers. The rest, like me, just people trying to live in peace, off the grid, away from the madness. We had solar panels, gravity-fed water, a garden large enough to hold through spring, and high ground. That mattered more than anything. When the roads filled with cars that never moved again, when the drones stopped circling, when supply drops from the state helicopters turned into target markers for wandering infected, we stopped calling the outside world civilization. We stopped waiting for rescue. We fought off our first breach on day 112. They came at night, slow ones, still clumsy, but strong. One tore through the gate before we could seal it. Brother Mikhail died with his arms around the thing's throat, pinning it until I buried a pickaxe in its spine. I couldn't sleep for 3 days after that. I thought about how he'd thanked me earlier that afternoon for harvesting the carrots early. I never forgot that. Kindness in the hours before death. Since then, it's been defense, salvage, and silence. We stopped using the generator. The sound was too risky. We learned to signal each other through hand signs and tapped code. We switched from rifles to bows. Arrows can be recovered, bullets cannot, and above all, we kept the walls watched. I sleep for a few hours, restless. My dreams are full of shadows that wear Thomas's face, but speak in a voice that's too calm, too knowing. I wake at dawn with a knot in my stomach that doesn't go away. The sun barely touches the far side of the chapel tower before I'm back on my feet, checking the traps on the north and east walls. No signs of movement. I retrieved the bloodied arrow from the forest. Wiped clean, shaft intact. I place it back into the quiver with the care one might give to a relic. Every piece matters. I don't go back down to the catacombs until the sun is well above the ridge and the goats are quiet again. The vault is still sealed. I unlock the rod and draw the door open slowly. The air hits me like a wet hand, damp and sour. I hold my breath and descend, not with fear, but with something heavier. I want answers. I want to find him, even if it means dragging him back in pieces. This time I bring 2 arrows, a backup taper, and the blade strapped across my thigh. I reach the 3rd vault and step inside. It's empty. Nothing remains but the candle in the center of the room. I light it, not because I need light, but because I want to see if it burns like real wax. It does, but the flame is too still. The air in here doesn't move. There's another door I never noticed before, set into the back wall, almost hidden by collapsed shelves. It's old, iron-banded, with a rusted handle fused in place. Thomas must have gone deeper. I press my ear to the seam. Nothing. But the air is warmer beyond it. That shouldn't be. I step back, mark the door with charcoal, and retreat. I don't go through yet. I need to prepare. Whatever lies behind that door is older than the rest of this place, and I need to know what kind of evil can wear a friend's skin like a mask and whisper your name as if it belongs to you. By the time I return to the surface, the sky is overcast. Clouds rolling in from the west. I feel the drop in pressure in my knees. There's a storm coming, the kind that drives the infected into caves and basements, and sometimes deeper than that. If there are others beneath this place, buried in some hidden catacomb, this storm might wake them. I spend the rest of the day reinforcing the entrances. I triple lock the bell tower hatch, bury the eastern door under gravel and stone, move the goats to the enclosed chapel cellar. They complain, but not for long. They sense the shift too. The monastery has survived nearly 2.5 years of ruin. It's seen blood, fire, mercy, and madness. But this feels different. It feels like something below has started breathing again. The storm arrives just after dusk. The first gust snaps a dead limb from the cedar above the refectory. The clouds are low, almost pressing against the upper walls. I listen from inside the chapel, seated in one of the old wooden pews, crossbow across my knees. The stained glass windows groan under the pressure of the wind. Rain hits the stones like nails, sharp and insistent. I haven't heard rain this heavy in months. The roof will hold. I checked every tile during the last dry spell. What concerns me isn't the rain itself, but what the storm might stir loose in the valley below, or in the catacombs beneath our feet. I used to welcome the storms. They made travel difficult for infected. The rain masked scent, the wind scattered sound. But lately, the silence after the storms unnerves me more than anything. It's the quiet that comes after, the unnatural stillness, like the land is holding its breath. In those moments, I've often found fresh prints near the outer gate, sometimes human, sometimes not. Once, I found a footprint where the toes pointed backward. Tonight I sit and wait. The goats settle beneath the cellar arch. I check on them twice before midnight. Their eyes catch the candlelight and reflect it back in dim gold, watching me without blinking. Animals like that don't pretend. They know what's real. They feel what moves beneath the surface. They watched the plague take men and bring them back wrong. We didn't have to teach them anything. They simply understood. I don't sleep. I walk the interior paths of the monastery, barefoot, blade sheathed. I make the circuit 5 times, through the cloister, past the garden, up the northern stairs, and down again. Each time, I check the walls. I pause at the place where the gargoyle used to be, where I first spotted the shape behind the stump. I look out into the dark forest, now shrouded by rain. I know there's no movement out there tonight. Whatever's watching isn't in the trees anymore. It's below. By morning, the storm passes. The clouds peel back reluctantly, revealing a sky scraped raw and colorless. No blue, just a dull stretch of ash-gray horizon. I make tea from the last of the dried mint leaves and drink it alone under the portico, staring at the sealed cellar door. I've avoided thinking about what I need to do next. But the truth is, The monastery isn't whole until I know what's happened to Thomas. If he's gone, I need to face it. If he's alive, I need to bring him back. Either way, the waiting is over. I gear up slowly, not out of hesitation, but precision. Every movement deliberate. I restring the bow with waxed sinew and double knot the loop. Check the fletching on each arrow. 8 total, 2 broadheads, 6 field tips. The iron blade I carry gets sharpened to a whisper edge. I grind the stone until it sings, then test the balance in my palm. I wear the old cassock over boiled leather, black on black, no metal to flash in the dark. Sound is the enemy now. Before I descend, I open the chapel one last time and kneel in the dust near the altar. Not to pray, at least, not in the way the old world taught us. I just sit, bow my head, and remember the names of the others. Gregor, Mikhail, Brother Soren, Elise, who taught us how to store grain without rot, Ramon, who died fixing the east sluice gate in the first flood, and Thomas, though I won't say his name out loud yet, not until I know. The catacomb door groans when I open it. The iron rod scrapes against stone with a sound like bone on bone. I carry a lantern this time, fueled by a mixture of alcohol and crushed pine resin. It burns clean and bright. I descend the stairs slowly, marking each step with chalk as I go. Not because I don't know the way, but because I need to know the return path exists. I pass the first vault, still empty. Second, intact. The third, where I last saw the thing wearing Thomas's robe, looks untouched. The wax candle in the center is gone. The back wall door is still there, hidden behind broken shelving. The iron banding is rusted, but I chipped away the worst of it yesterday and oiled the hinge. I set the lantern down, press my ear to the door. Nothing. Then a faint sound. Not movement, not breathing. A low hum, like air moving through a tight throat. I draw the bolt and push. The door opens into a narrow tunnel, steeper than I expected. The walls are rough-cut stone, older than the rest of the monastery. Dust thick enough to coat the lantern glass. I step through and close the door behind me. The darkness is deeper here. It's not just absence of light. It's something denser, like the shadows have weight. My footsteps don't echo the same way. They come back to me slower, blurred. I follow the tunnel for what feels like 10 minutes, maybe more. No side passages, just a slow descent into the earth. Then the space widens. The floor becomes tile, cracked, uneven. The walls curve. I emerge into a circular chamber with a vaulted ceiling. It's lit, dimly, not from my lantern, but from something else. Bioluminescence clinging to the ceiling in faint blue patches. I've seen that once before, in a limestone cavern during a salvage run. But this is different. There are symbols etched into the walls. Old ones, barely visible. A spiral within a cross. A circle marked with hands. Not Christian, not anything I recognize. There are shelves built into the stone, filled with scrolls too brittle to touch. Dried husks of paper. Bones, small ones, arranged with deliberate symmetry. And in the far corner a robe. Black, folded neatly. The exact kind Thomas wore. I cross the chamber slowly, scanning every surface. No blood, no signs of violence. Just an eerie stillness, like this place has been waiting. When I reach the robe, I find a scrap of paper tucked beneath it, folded, square, marked with something that looks like a seal. I open it. The handwriting is Thomas's, shaky, uneven. Don't follow. I thought I heard the call. I was wrong. It is not God below. Seal it behind me. I freeze, lantern held high. Something shifts behind me. A small sound, like cloth brushing stone. I turn fast. The chamber is empty. I spin again. Nothing. Then I notice something else. My lantern flame has started to dim. Not from lack of fuel. It's being smothered. The air here is heavy, but not from gas or smoke. It's dense with presence. Like something massive is crouched in the dark, holding its breath. I step back toward the tunnel entrance and mark the doorframe with another line of chalk. Then I retreat the way I came, lantern held close. Each step feels longer than the one before. The tunnel seems to stretch behind me. I keep moving. I don't run. I don't give it reason to follow. Whatever Thomas heard, whatever voice pulled him down here, it's still whispering, just not in a voice I can hear. I seal the iron door behind me and wedge it shut with stones and mortar from a collapsed vault wall. I smear the seam with ash from the chapel fire, not because I believe it will hold anything back, but because rituals matter when reason runs thin. Then I return to the chapel. I check the goats. I check the traps. I sit in the same pew where I began. Outside, the rain has started again, but lighter now, softer, like a lullaby played for the earth before it gives up breathing. The day after I sealed the catacomb door, the rain came back. It wasn't like the last storm. This one was softer, steadier, a long sigh of weather across the ridge. I spent most of the morning in the chapel, watching it through the broken stained glass window above the altar. The colored pieces had fallen out long ago, but there was still enough left to tint the floor in fractured patterns. Water ran down the arch stones. I didn't light a candle. I didn't open the prayer book. I just sat there, listening to the quiet, and trying not to imagine the shape of Tomas's body somewhere down below, folded into a corner of that hidden chamber, with his voice still trapped in its throat. Around mid-afternoon, I stepped out to check the garden fencing. Some of the older stakes were beginning to rot at the base, and the wind had loosened the perimeter line. It was the kind of small, methodical work I could lose myself in for an hour. I crouched near the planter box and began retying a stretch of twine when I heard something I hadn't heard in a very long time, the soft groan of the bell rope shifting. I froze with my hands still tangled in twine. The wind had been calm all day. There was no reason for the bell rope to move, no current strong enough to tug the line where it hung above the gate. It wasn't the full clang of the bell, just a subtle creak, the sound of weight. Someone had touched it, or maybe something. I held my breath and listened, straining to hear anything else. Nothing followed. No footfall, no voice. Just the wind returning like it had never left. I stood slowly and backed into the archway near the cloister steps, my hand resting against the handle of my blade. I didn't draw it. Not yet. I waited another 30 seconds, then moved quietly toward the gate tower. I stepped where I knew the stones were dry, where moss didn't grow. My pace was steady, deliberate. Years of patrolling these grounds had taught me exactly where not to step if I wanted to remain unheard. I reached the inner courtyard and paused at the edge of the portico. Nothing moved, but there were fresh prints in the gravel. 2 sets, clearly made after the rain stopped, barefoot, light but defined. They came from the outer wall and led in a slow, meandering path toward the bell tower before vanishing into the patch of overgrowth near the western slope. I scanned the tree line for movement, then climbed the watchpost on the north wall with my crossbow strapped across my back. The steps were slick but familiar, and the sky had begun to thin behind the clouds, revealing slivers of pale gold where the sun tried to break through. I crouched low beside the parapet and waited. 20 minutes passed. The forest swayed gently, fog rolling in lazy bands along the slope. The wind shifted again, coming up from the south. Another 15 minutes went by. Then I saw him. He emerged from the tree line near the cedar grove. Alone, upright, not stumbling like the infected. His gait was controlled, steady. He wore a dark coat, faded at the shoulders, and carried a walking stick that he leaned on lightly, more like a habit than a necessity. He stopped just beyond the broken fence post where the goats used to graze, and looked up at the wall. He didn't call out, didn't wave, just stood there, watching. I waited for movement, signs of infection, tics, spasms, glassy eyes, but he remained still. I raised 3 fingers from behind the wall, standard signal, palm out, a request for him to show his hands. He responded immediately, lifting both arms slowly, fingers spread. Then he dropped the walking stick and stepped forward into the clearing, crossing the space toward the gate. I hesitated, then moved quickly to the tower ladder and descended. My left hand rested near the release catch for the outer gate lock. I waited another 10 seconds, then opened it just wide enough to speak. "What do you want?" I asked, voice calm, flat, not a threat, just a line in the sand. The man didn't hesitate. "Shelter," he said. "Just for the night." There was no pleading in his voice, no desperation. He didn't try to move closer. He kept his hands raised until I nodded and unbarred the gate. I let him in with one eye on the tripwire and another on his shadow. He crossed the threshold with the patience of someone who knew how quickly welcome could vanish. I relocked the gate and motioned him toward the chapel steps. He followed without question. Inside, I offered him a portion of the boiled roots I'd cooked that morning, though he ate little. We sat across from each other on opposite sides of the nave, the broken window casting strips of evening light across the stone floor. He told me he'd been walking the ridge trails for weeks. He didn't say where he came from, just that the lowlands were empty, worse than he'd expected, and that something was wrong with the way the animals moved. "It's like they're listening to something we can't hear," he said, "or waiting for a command." He spoke slowly, like every word had to pass through filters he wasn't fully aware of. I studied him for a while. His skin was pale from travel. His boots, tied to his belt, were cracked, but dry. His eyes were sharp. No fever, no infection. But there was something else in him. A quiet, the kind that goes deeper than silence. When I asked if he'd seen any survivors, he shook his head. "Not alive," he said, "and not recently." He paused. "Except you." He didn't say it like a compliment, more like a diagnosis. I didn't respond. We finished eating in silence. As night fell, I offered him a blanket and gestured toward the spare cot in the western transept. He didn't thank me, just nodded and settled in. I returned to the bell tower that night. Something about the man, his movements, his gaze, his understanding of this place, left me uneasy. He hadn't asked about the traps, hadn't questioned the drawn symbols, hadn't flinched when the wind passed through the arches and made the chapel sing in that low, almost human tone. Either he'd seen things worse than this, or he belonged to them. When morning came, the cot was empty. No footprints on the stone, no signs of packing. The blanket folded neatly at the foot of the cot, exactly how the monks used to do it. The food untouched. I searched the grounds, the garden, the gate. Nothing, not even a scuff of gravel out of place. For a long while, I stood at the chapel threshold, wondering if I'd imagined the entire thing. A hallucination born from hunger, solitude, guilt. But when I returned to the cloister, I found something carved into the back of the stone bench where he'd sat the night before. It wasn't a name, just a spiral, small, precise, cut shallow into the stone, exactly like the ones in the vault. I stared at it for a long time before I finally stood, turned, and walked the perimeter of the monastery again. I didn't redraw the chalk lines. I didn't repair the fencing. I didn't light the candle near the altar. That night, I dreamed of Thomas standing at the foot of my cot. His arms were folded, his face expressionless, and when he opened his mouth, the voice that came out was mine. The next morning is colder than it should be. The sun rises behind a veil of pale mist that clings low to the ground, bleeding across the outer paths and curling up around the garden stones, like it's trying to seep through the cracks. I don't recall ever seeing fog like this up here. Not in summer. Not at this elevation. It moves too slow, too thick, almost like it's not being pushed by the air at all. It just exists, settling across the monastery grounds with the same quiet persistence I've come to fear from everything else that has survived this long. I don't touch the catacomb door. I don't walk near it. The wall I built over it last night held through the storm, and this morning I lay a second line of stone along its base, not to reinforce it but to mark it, a reminder. It's not so much about keeping something in or out now. It's about boundaries, about where I draw the line between what I'm willing to confront and what must be left buried. The goats are quiet again, unnaturally so. They haven't bleated since yesterday afternoon. They're eating, but without sound. No shuffling hooves, no snorts or fussing. They glance toward me when I enter the cellar, but none rise. That's not fear, not entirely. It feels more like obedience, like they've recognized the monastery itself has changed, and now they're behaving accordingly. There are moments during the day when I catch myself stopping mid-task, standing still with my hand half extended, or my foot hovering just above a step, as if I've forgotten where I was going. It's subtle, but it happens more than it should. I chalk it up to stress, lack of sleep, the weight of what's happened to Thomas. But some part of me doesn't buy that. The air feels different now. Not poisoned, not sick, but charged, as though the walls of this place have absorbed something. A pressure maybe, a memory. I return to the bell tower at midday. I haven't been up there since the breach. It's one of the few spots that still gives me a view past the ridge and into the valley beyond. The stairs groan under my weight, wood swollen from last night's rain. I climb slow, crossbow on my back, quiver secured, blade at the ready. No one ever used to carry weapons up here. This was a place for reflection, for breath and sunlight and prayer. Now it feels more like a sniper's perch. I reach the hatch, unbar it, and step onto the upper platform. The view should be comforting, but it isn't. The trees down in the valley are thinning, not from disease, not from weather, but from movement. Trails cut through the brush that I know weren't there 2 weeks ago. Curved paths, looping, the kind of trails that don't follow the logic of animals or men. Something's been wandering down there, over and over, walking the same patterns again and again, until the grass gave way and the earth remembered. I track one path with my eyes until it disappears near the ruins of an old service road. Beyond that, a bare spot, circular, perfectly smooth, where nothing seems to grow anymore. I don't like what that implies. I don't like that it reminds me of the chamber below. I spend the next few days tightening routines, repairing what can be repaired. I strip a few salvaged radio boards for copper and use the wire to reinforce the pen gate. I mend the herb garden fencing, though nothing has grown well since the spring. The basil wilted early, the thyme turned bitter. We had beets once, and carrots, but the soil seems tired now. It's not just exhaustion, it's like something in the ground changed. On the third morning, the birds don't sing. That's what finally makes me stop pretending things are normal. Not the fog, not the goats, not the silence in the air, but the absence of birdsong. Every morning before this, no matter the weather, some fool crow or robin would scream its way into the day. But not now. I walk the perimeter of the wall and don't hear a single wing beat. No feathers rustling in the trees. Nothing but the wind. I go back to the chapel and find the old prayer logs. Not because I'm feeling religious, but because the monks who lived here before us kept meticulous notes. Observations about the land, the sky, even how the trees moved. I flip through entry after entry. Days of fasting, days of song, days of rest. Then I find something that makes me sit up straighter. An entry from almost 80 years ago. We sealed the lower passage again. The voices had returned, faint but unmistakable. Brother Andrew claims to have seen Father Lucas standing at the foot of his bed, though Lucas has been dead these past 12 years. No birds for 3 days. The goats will not drink. The well water tastes of iron. We are to observe silence until the feast of St. Peter. If the voices persist, we may send word to the diocesan office. But the last messenger never returned. The passage is brief, terse, no follow-up. I turn the page. Different handwriting, a hymn about light. No explanation, no resolution. But the signs are too familiar. This has happened before. Whatever's beneath us has stirred in the past, and someone tried to forget it. I spend the rest of that day pacing, circling the place like a wolf trapped in its own den. Every few hours I check the cellar, check the pen, check the mortar wall over the catacomb door. It hasn't moved, but I find myself touching it when I pass. Just a hand pressed to the stone, like I expect to feel it breathing on the other side. I try to sleep that night, but the dreams don't let me. It's not nightmares. There's no chase, no screams, just corridors, long circular passages that curve gently and never end. The walls breathe. The floor is soft. I walk barefoot and hear my own footsteps repeating behind me, a half-second too late, like an echo being corrected. I wake just before dawn with a single phrase in my head, spoken in Thomas's voice. Nothing is forgotten beneath stone. I don't remember hearing him say that, ever. By the time the sun rises, I've made my decision. The monastery has stood long enough on memory and ritual. It's time to act. Not recklessly, not in defiance, but in preparation. I begin drawing up a defense, not against a horde, but against something else. A different kind of breach. I reinforce the chapel interior, creating narrow choke points in case something gets through. I design fallback lines across the cloister, setting up rigged noise traps with broken glass and fishing line. I prepare oil pots in the bell tower, last resort firebombs using fermented vegetable oil and alcohol tinctures. We haven't needed fire in months, but the time for restraint may be ending. I dig a trench near the well and bury the remaining scrolls from the lower vault, the ones I found too brittle to read. If the worst happens, I don't want whatever comes next to find them. Maybe the old monks knew more than they wrote down. Maybe what's beneath us isn't just infection or madness or rot. Maybe it's belief turned inside out. Whatever it is, it doesn't think the way we do. It waits, and it wears faces. For the rest of the day, I work like I'm preparing for siege. Every sound echoes more than it should, carries farther. Even the clang of a bucket against the stone edge of the well seems to linger longer than the laws of acoustics allow. I grind dried rose hips and mix them with the last of the black powder, enough to load a small trip flare and scatter it across the western steps. My hands move with certainty, but my thoughts drift. I keep returning to what Thomas wrote. It is not God below. That choice of words matters. He hadn't lost his faith. He'd redirected it, or been forced to. By late afternoon, I set the last trap in the vestry corridor and seal off the refectory from the garden with salvaged barn doors and iron nails. There's no one left here but me, yet I build these walls as if I expect others to return, or as if the monastery still serves a purpose beyond my own survival. That idea used to feel noble. Now it feels like a delay tactic, a reason to not run. When the wind picks up after sundown, I climb the bell tower again. I bring the lantern, the crossbow, and a single sealed jar of oil, just in case. The forest below is unmoving. The trails are still there, those looping paths where nothing grows. But I swear they've shifted. One of the loops now forms a figure 8. I draw it in charcoal on the railing. The spiral pattern from below is starting to repeat itself above ground. I don't know how or why, but it's happening. The land remembers. Or worse, it's being taught. I stay on the tower through the night. I don't sleep. When the stars finally appear behind the clouds, I find myself whispering names again. Not prayers, just names. I speak them like you'd speak to photos in a forgotten drawer. Thomas, Mikhail, Elise. I speak until the names become sounds without meaning, syllables that don't belong to anyone anymore. The wind takes them. The stone doesn't respond. At some point after midnight, I feel a weight shift behind me. A presence. The tower platform creaks just once. Not enough to panic. Just enough to signal intent. I don't turn right away. I don't want to. My hand moves toward the crossbow, but not quickly. Whoever, or whatever, is standing behind me doesn't rush. It waits. It always waits. Then a voice. Smooth, controlled. Thomas. It's not a question. It doesn't speak like someone claiming a name. It speaks like someone reminding me of it, as if I'd forgotten. I turn slowly, crossbow half raised. What I see isn't shocking. Not at first. It looks like Thomas. The robe, the posture, the gentle eyes. But the closer you look, the more the details crumble. His stance is wrong, too precise. His face, too calm, too symmetrical, like someone painted a memory. But what strikes me isn't what I see, it's what I don't. He casts no shadow, not even in the lantern light behind me. And his breath doesn't mist. I speak his name, not to acknowledge him, but to test it. I say, Thomas, as you would say the name of a thing you used to love and now fear. His expression doesn't change, his head tilts. Then he says something I'll never forget. You kept it clean, you remembered the lines. He gestures toward the chapel, toward the cloister paths, toward the archways I repaired, the symbols I redrew in charcoal when the originals faded. I hadn't done it for doctrine. I'd done it out of habit, structure, discipline. But now, hearing those words in that voice, It feels like I've been performing a ritual I never understood, one that meant something to something else. He doesn't move, neither do I. I finally speak. What are you? Tomas, if that's what it is, doesn't flinch, doesn't blink. He answers with quiet certainty. Memory, worn thin. And then, with no other warning, he turns and walks back down the tower stairs, one foot after the other, soundless. I don't follow. I stay up there until the sun rises, casting long pale rays over the wall and across the distant pines. I watch the spot where he vanished. My finger rests near the crossbow trigger for a long time, but I never pull. In the days that follow, I try to make sense of it. I read the old logs again. I trace the etched symbols near the altar. One of them matches the spiral from the catacombs, hidden beneath the lectern, covered by a cloth until now. It's not a symbol of faith. It's a binding mark, a seal, the kind you place over something that shouldn't wake. The monastery wasn't built despite what was buried here. It was built because of it, or maybe around it. And I've been maintaining it. I stop cleaning the cloister paths. I let the outer lines smudge and fade. I scatter the small stones I once arranged in neat rows. The goats refuse to eat from the northern trough now. Something's changed again. The birds haven't returned. The forest trails now stretch higher up the mountain. I can see them from the southern lookout. Always curved, always in the same rhythm. It's no longer animals making them, no longer survivors. Something is walking those paths with purpose. I catch myself watching the catacomb door again. Not out of fear, not anymore, but out of a strange, reluctant understanding. The line between faith and function, between ritual and control, it blurred a long time ago. I think the old monks knew that. I think Thomas realized it too late. I carve a message into the inside of the chapel door, not in Latin, not in the old symbols, just in plain words, for anyone who comes after. This place remembers, let it forget. I sharpen my arrows again. Not because I plan to fight what's beneath. I know better now. I do it because there are still things outside these walls that can be fought. The infected still roam the edges of the valley. Raiders still follow old maps, looking for lost food or relics. They are not illusions. They bleed, and I can still protect against them. That's what the bow is for. That's what I'm for. It's almost comforting, the act of preparing. Sitting by the stone bench in the cloister, the sun slipping behind the tower's silhouette, fingers wrapped around feather and flint, the scrape of the blade a quiet rhythm I can control. I finish each shaft with care, check the balance, twist the sinew to hold the tip. When the wind brushes past, I pause and listen, not because I expect anything, but because silence has earned its own weight in these walls. I listen to know if I'm still here. Something inside me says, I won't need these arrows. Not much longer. That same something says I should write. Not prayers, not confession, just a record, a mark, like the chalk lines on the catacomb walls. Something that says, I existed. I return to the chapel and sit beneath the window with the fractured glass. It used to show St. Hubert, bow in hand, hound at his feet, the deer with the glowing cross between its antlers. The image is warped now, half covered in dust and weatherwear, but enough of it remains to remind me who I once thought I could become. My hand aches as I write. The ink smudges from the tremor in my fingers. I ignore it. I write what I remember. How we arrived here in the early days of the outbreak. How Tomas kept the records. How we built the gardens and replaced the roof with our own hands. How we learned silence not just as survival, but as reverence. And how one by one, we buried the others in the orchard grove. I don't write what came after. Not the spirals, not the false voices. Some truths aren't meant to be preserved. Some are better left forgotten with the names on the stones. I think about Thomas more often now. I still see his face at night, but it's not twisted anymore. Not wrong, just tired. He stands in the alcove near the candle shelf, hands together, watching me. Sometimes he says something, but I can't quite hear it. Like the words are muffled through stone. The dreams feel more real than waking, and sometimes, more kind. The truth is, I've been tired for weeks. More than tired. I've been slipping. I haven't eaten much since the fever. That scratch I got on my shoulder. It's worse than I let myself admit. I wrapped it tight, cleaned it, but it burns all the way through now. Deep. There's a black line running from the wound toward my neck. I know what that means. I've seen it before. In Elise, in Mikhail, in Gregor's last breath, when he asked me to sing something for him, and I couldn't remember the words. I keep pushing because that's what monks do, even broken ones. We maintain, we protect, we observe. But today, my hands feel weak. My legs don't want to carry me. I lie down near the apse on a pile of woven mats, facing the high window where the light used to fall through the saint's face. The air is cold, but I don't shiver anymore. My eyes close, and the weight lifts just slightly, like something is finally letting go. And then I remember. It didn't happen this way. Not the spirals, not the echoing footsteps, not Thomas walking the halls again. The monastery didn't fall apart over months. It happened in a single night. We were down in the catacombs. Thomas thought he heard someone calling from the old wine chamber. He went ahead with a lantern. I followed with the bow drawn. We passed the second vault, the third. The air was too still. The ground was wet from the rains that week, the stones slick. When we reached the deeper passage, something rushed us. I never saw it clearly, just motion and teeth. Thomas screamed. The lantern broke. There was fire briefly, then shadows. I remember falling, hitting my shoulder, a sharp pain, something tearing into my side. I managed to shoot one arrow, maybe two. I don't know if they landed. I only know I crawled backward through the dark, bleeding and half blind, until I wedged myself behind a collapsed shelf. The thing didn't follow, or maybe it did, and I passed out before it could finish the job. Everything after that, this long vigil, the birdsong vanishing, the fog, the voice wearing Thomas's name, none of it happened. Not really. It was the shape of memory twisted by infection, my mind trying to make sense of the waiting, filling the silence with meaning, turning fever into theology. I've been lying here ever since, somewhere in the lower crypts, alone. The monastery still stands above me, I think. Maybe the goats wandered off. Maybe someone else will find this place one day and wonder who kept the walls straight and the gates sealed. They'll find the arrows, the tools, the maps, maybe even the stained glass window, cracked and full of dust. And they'll ask if anyone survived here. I hope they never come below. There's nothing left here but the body of a man who believed too hard in patterns and the soft rattle of breath that's already halfway gone. In my final moments, I imagine the monastery as it was on the first day. Sunlight through the chapel arch. Thomas setting out the cups for tea. The sound of boots on gravel. The smell of bread. A world not yet broken by fire and madness. I hold on to that until even the memory starts to dissolve. And somewhere, far above the stones, a bird sings once and is quiet. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.